Boardroom Bound, Episode 160, Discovering Your Value Proposition to Position Yourself for Board Roles, with Marla Persky.
You need to make it easy for people to help you. So when you network, you need to network in a way that incentivizes people to keep you top of mind and to make introductions and think of you when opportunities arise.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Marla Persky. She is someone who has very successfully navigated her senior executive career on the legal side mostly, translating that across into a portfolio of board roles, public, private, nonprofit. Wonderful, actionable advice about how you can build your candidacy from her perspective as the chair of a nom-gov committee to put yourself forward and put your candidacy out there. Before we jump into today's show, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor about director certification. Want to join your first board, or are you looking for additional board seat opportunities? In either scenario, be sure to be disciplined in your approach. Now, through the Becoming an Exceptional Board Director Candidate Coaching and Certification course, you get both modern board director candidate packaging and modern board operations knowledge integrated within one program. Remember, the key to landing additional or your first board seat is in your packaging. Make the effort to do it right. Program graduates also receive their globally recognized International Board Director Competency Designation upon course completion. It's designed for individuals and groups. You can learn more at bit.ly/IBDC-D. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/IBCDC-D. And now let's jump into the show. Marla Persky, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Happy to be here.
Well, this is a wonderful background that you bring to this show because as a lawyer, obviously you'll make sure things are done right, but also it is not an uncommon path. We regularly hear from people that are, say, going down the general counsel path that work with boards, that want to be on boards. But certainly we talk about people having a certain background and experience that they're known for, and some of that will become from your legal work, but other things as well. So I'm excited to bring your story to our audience today. But before I dive into it, let's start at the very beginning. So you didn't become the sought-after board member right overnight. You had to build up in, I will call like the first act of your career, your successful executive. So walk us through how that part of your career first started, and then we'll go over to the board stuff.
Sure. I wish I could tell you, Alexander, that I had planned everything, but I think what's more true for me is that I am very opportunistic. So I'm the first person in my family to go to college, so I didn't have any role models. And I ended up backing into law school. And if I had known then what I know now, I probably would have gone to get an MBA. But I didn't understand what you learn for an MBA. So I went to law school. I became a lawyer. And luckily enough for me, I moved in-house after 4 years of practicing law. And that was a very good thing. Because as it turns out, I enjoy business more than I do the actual practice of law. And when you move in-house, it gives you the opportunity to be a business person who happens to have legal expertise. And so I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for the vast majority of my career. First at Baxter International, where I actually moved in between legal roles and business roles, which was great because it gave me an understanding of the business at a very base P&L level. And eventually I left Baxter. I went to Boehringer Ingelheim, which is the largest privately owned pharmaceutical company in the world. And I was there for almost a decade. And when I couldn't stand the thought of practicing law any longer, I had to think about what I wanted to do next. And so I thought about taking my business experience and putting it to work in helping people exceed in their career. So I do executive coaching now, primarily for sitting general counsel. Now, my experience in the healthcare space, combined with the fact that I have had the opportunity to do business work, allowed me to rub shoulders with a lot of people throughout my career. And I think to be on a board, to get on a board, you need to network. And networking came naturally for me. And I I think the reason why people want me to be on boards now is because of my industry experience, because of the skills I garnered as a lawyer, listening, asking questions, challenging conventional wisdom for purpose not of being correct, but of helping make the correct decisions. And the people who have asked me to be on their boards are people who have worked with me throughout my career, both in business and in law. And they knew what it was like to work with me. And they realized that I helped them achieve their goals and make better business decisions. So that's a long, drawn out answer, Alexander, that really is I got to where I am today because of the work I did and the people who I helped along the way.
So, Marla, that was actually really helpful, and it opens up several different themes that we'll go into now over the course of this show. And I'll just highlight a couple, and then we'll go down into these in more depth. So, when someone were to summarize you today, looking at you as a portfolio board member, they would look at some of the different things that you did, even when you were a lawyer, and use those as skill sets now, like your strong M&A experience, right? That you would have done perhaps partly on the legal side. And when we think about a lawyer, that could be so many different things someone does. So, but you also were a general counsel, as we talked about, right? Very senior lawyer at a firm, which means you were working with boards already and had those experience. And so I want to touch on both of those. And I want to highlight something I'm going to come back to as well. You got your first board role while you were still in that general counsel seat, right? So really interesting with a public company. So let's sort of go into some of these themes. Everyone needs a brand and a reputation, and it has to precede them to some extent for why someone would want them on a board. You also hit another part. You have a strong network. People knew you, trusted you, valued you, realized you would add value to an organization. So how did you take all of those aspects and then figure out, okay, I want to do board stuff, so alert your network perhaps so that they were aware of opportunities for you? How did that actually come about that that first board seat opened up for you?
Well, I actually think I need to answer your question with the second board seat because my first board seat, which I got, actually, I wasn't a general counsel yet. I was deputy general counsel at Baxter International. I got that because of a referral, and I hadn't even thought that I wanted to be a board member. It kind of fell in my lap. And that's where the opportunistic part of me came to play. So when the opportunity came for me to be on a board, even though it was a surprising opportunity, I grabbed it. And then after serving on that, and certainly I knew what it was to be on a board. I had been servicing boards and in my legal role, but to be a board member was not something I really thought about. But after becoming a board member, I realized I really, really liked it. And so the networking came into play to get into my second board seat because the first board seat was just basically manna from heaven as far as I can describe it. Because I realized I liked board service, I started to talk to people about my interest and experience in being on boards. And it's important that you don't present. I realized pretty quickly that it's all about branding, right? I wasn't looking for another general counsel or legal role. So I created a whole different resume that would be appealing to somebody who was looking for a board member as opposed to a general counsel. And when I highlighted what I did or talked about what I did, I focused on translatable skills that apply to any and all companies and are required from board members. And that is strategic thinking, understanding the industry, understanding product flow from R&D through the end of a patent life cycle. Because again, I'm focusing in on an industry that I have the greatest experience. Growing internationally, the way you enter markets, the way you get reimbursed in the pharmaceutical industry is different geographically. I have that background. I have that knowledge. And so when I would speak with people about the type of boards I was interested in, I would focus in on industry, and I also focused in on company life cycle. Now, as a general counsel, I always worked for very, very large companies. As it turns out, the board service I enjoy the most are earlier stage companies. So again, when I was talking with people who would include other lawyers, importantly, other people who served on boards and CEOs and accountants, audit partners, headhunters, I would talk about my interest in the pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical space, but in earlier stage companies, because that's when you can really have an impact.
So, Marla, that makes a lot of sense, right? So you've changed your packaging to appeal to the right audience. That makes a lot of sense to us. And now you do have this back pocket great situation where you're on a current board. And you were talking about networking before, about how people know you, the boards have opened up. I'm imagining you're sitting around the table with other board members knowing that they're also interested in board and they know other people's on board. So I imagine that might have been one of the first groups that you were building relationships with. And it might have been a quid pro quo in a sense of you're also looking for opportunities for them if they're the right fit for opportunities you know about. How do you go about having conversations like that? What guidance would you give to our listeners?
Well, really honest conversations where for people who have been board members far longer than I was a board member at the time, I would ask them about their experience serving on multiple boards and what did they think served them best in getting their second, their third, et cetera, board. And their answer would always be the same, is be networking. And I wouldn't just take networking for an answer. I would say, so tell me what networking means to you. Because people like to talk about themselves and they like to share information on their successes. And so based upon what I would hear them say is how I would start to try to influence their thinking about me and their willingness to introduce me to people in their networks. And this is true whether somebody was a board member or was a CEO or another member of the C-suite. And it's consistently asking people what their experience has been and what they know and how I can then tap into their knowledge base to make it easy for them to help. An uninspiring conversation is when somebody says, oh, I'm really interested in being on a board. If you hear of anything that would be good for me, please keep me in mind. Well, now that's making my desire to be on a board their problem. And that's not helpful. Why would they take that on? You need to make it easy for people to help you. So when you network, you need to network in a way that incentivizes people to keep you top of mind and to make introductions and think of you when opportunities arise.
So I agree with exactly what you said there, and I want to make it even super simple for our audience listening to this. So let me give you one example based on what you said earlier. And I agree with this. I get those conversations. People say, help me be in a board. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. That's like saying, can you get me a job? That's too vague. It doesn't make any sense. So you gave one part, I think, of the answer before is like, I am interested in pharma, life science type companies, especially the early stage ones. Now that narrows it down a lot for me. That's a lot more helpful. But I think there's even more than that. So help but breadcrumb this for our listeners, would you? What else would you be telling them to make it easy?
I tell them what my value proposition is. And a value proposition in my nomenclature is what that which you bring to the table so that a board and a company is better having you on it than not having you on it. What is the unique thing that you bring to the table, your value proposition? And so if you and I were talking and about board service and what I could bring to your board, I would, and you already knew about my industry experience, and we already talked about why I'm interested in earlier stage companies. I would share with you that I, my industry expertise plays well into helping companies think through product life cycles and what they need to do in order to appeal to a variety of audiences, whether they be investors, whether they be bankers, competitors, regulators, customers, payors. And I understand the business from that variety of levels because I've been in the industry for over 30 years. So it's not just, you know, where the business is today, but how to position the business today for growth tomorrow. And that's what I bring to the table, along with the ability to help people discuss and decide upon the risk benefit analysis for things. It's okay to take big risks if there's big benefits. It's stupid to take big risks for very minimal benefit. And that's one of the things I do is help identify risk benefit ratios.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'd love if you'd also talk a little bit more networking for us, because I really liked your comment to people of, tell me what that means to you. And it's a way to open up the door, understand what they're talking about, deepen the relationship, and be able to give them the information that's helpful. Now, you also hinted for us before, all of your opportunities have come through your network, which makes sense. And people have to build that network, right? They want to supplement whoever they already know with probably intelligently using their time in the right spaces. And I know you've done things like active engagement in professional community organizations. Tell us more about that, the approach that you took and sort of the guidance that you would give to others, maybe what has been most successful, perhaps not the best use of time as you learned going along, as people think about, I need to expand my network in the right spaces to facilitate the opportunities to be on boards.
So you need to so assume you have your brand or your value proposition, and you have your collateral materials, i.e., your LinkedIn profile and your board resume and your bio for board service. Those are things that you need in order to be able to do an elevator speech or to respond quickly if somebody says, "Oh, I might know something that'd be good for you. Can you send me some information?" You don't want to then take a week to get something to them. You need to have that already. So who are those people who may say, "Oh, you know, I think I might know somebody to introduce you to, or I might know of something." Those people are people who work on and with boards on a regular basis. So they are CEOs, CFOs, board members themselves. You may have to develop a network of people who are not normally in your circle of acquaintances. And how did I do that? So number one, I did that by attending things that other board members attend. NACD and other board continuing education organizations, I would sometimes present to them, but more often I would go as an attendee because I wanted to sit at the table next to other board members as opposed to talking to them about something as a presenter. I also stayed in touch with the people who I have worked with in the past as we've all gone on to other companies and all gone on to other opportunities. You never know who is going to become CEO of a new company and remember you and call on you. And in fact, that's how I've gotten on two of the boards that I've served on, is because I worked with people in the past. Um, I served on an industry committee where I met some other people who weren't part of my companies, but I met them and they were part of other companies. And they saw me in action and they heard me talk and they understood what I could accomplish. So you need to get out there, and there are headhunters, right? There are search firms who specialize in board placement, but only about 25% of open board seats are filled by search firms. The vast majority of open board seats are filled because of networking. Either somebody who's already on the board knows of a good candidate, or the CEO, the general counsel, the CFO, the audit partner of whoever the external auditor is. They know people, and how that's how you get on a board.
And that makes a lot of sense. And let's actually draw upon your knowledge again, because you are chair of a NomGov committee, right? That is a sort of secret black box and people wonder how the secret sauce happens. Now, tell me your perspective on this. I've heard it from other NomGov chairs. When they start a search, they've got their board composition matrix. Here's the kind of person we think we need based on who is retiring or what we're going to do in the organization in the future. And then they go around the room. Like, who do we know? Because we want to make sure they fit within our culture. We can't take any risks. We have to make sure we get this right. And they build their initial list, and they might bring in the headhunters to vet them or maybe add some more names, but it really begins that way. What is the experience like for you, and how do you advise other people to make sure that they understand the process? Because like you said, it's really, you can spend time with headhunters, but you really need to make sure you're on the radar of the people in the room already.
I pretty much tell people what you and I have been talking about, and that is, number one, you need to understand why you want to be on the board, and what you're not, and which is a little different than your value propositions. One thing is what you bring to a board. The other is, why do you want to be on a board? Do you understand what it means to serve on a board? I have spoken with many people who say they're interested in being on a board, but they're interested because they think it's going to make them a lot of money. That's actually not a very compelling reason why I would want you on my board.
Right, right, right.
So why do you want to be on a board? Why do you find satisfying about it? Everybody wants to have fellow board members who are collaborative and collegial. So, we don't want money grubbers. We want somebody who's there because they want to protect the interests of the shareholders. They like the business. They think they can help move it forward, but not as a doer, as an advisor. There are a lot of people, CEOs included, who are not good board members, even though they have a beautiful resume, but they're not good board members because they don't understand the essential difference between being a CEO and being a board member. There's an old adage. A good board member has their fingers out and their nose in.
Right. And that is hard the first time you get on a board to make that adjustment from having been so successful at doing all of your career. And clearly that is, as you've talked about, shown something that's really been enjoyable for you. And you've loved being in that advisory capacity and sharing with them, so much so that you have your board portfolio of boards across different types of boards. So public, private, nonprofit. But it's hard, and it varies depending on the different types of companies, the different life cycle you're in. How would you help someone figure out, okay, this is who I am today. I want to be that board person, knowing exactly what you talked about, how hard that challenge is to be in a different seat. And depending on the type of org you're in, especially say compensated versus non-compensated on a nonprofit, the expectations are different. How does someone figure out the right type of board seat that they should be looking to fill?
Well, it first starts with personality, right? Do you like the other board members? Do you trust the management team. And so that it's as important to be an interviewer as well as an interviewee when you're asked to be on a board. A lot of people I know, this is particularly true for the very first board, when an opportunity comes to them because of their hard work and networking or through a search professional or whatever, they're so excited to be considered for the board, they go into heavy selling mode and they forget that they should be interviewing the company and the fellow board members as vociferously as they are being vetted. Because the worst thing in the world is to find yourself on a board where you don't trust management and you don't trust your fellow board members.
I agree. And it's such a hard thing to do, even the due diligence process. And I'm sure it's become easier for you now that you've had multiple board seats of figuring out the right questions to ask, how to be involved. And of course, that process has become so much more challenging during COVID because we're not meeting face to face as often. Some boards are still only doing virtual stuff. So knowing that and knowing that the world has changed, I'd be curious to hear about yourself, thinking about, chairing a nom-gov committee. What is the right process for someone to be using today to figure out how they're going to be a fit? Boards don't necessarily meet as much in person as they used to, so getting up to speed is a lot harder. You're not able to build the relationships over a Zoom coffee as much as you can sitting around at the dinner before the board meeting. What is the guidance that you would give people?
Well, I don't know that there's one right way to do it. I can tell you what I do. Again, first, start with my fellow board members and C-suite folks. Who do you know? This is the type of individual with background experience we would like to add to the board. Do you know anybody who fits this? And I always start with my fellow board members as well as the C-suite because those individuals know the personality. Because there's two things. Number one is who has the right skill set, but then it's whether that person fits. Because you don't want to add a disruptor. You want board members who facilitate things getting done and who don't, act as roadblocks to getting things done. So I start with the people that I know and who know the company. From there, I have people in my own network too, because I am out there meeting people, and they may not know the company and they may not know the culture of the company, but I know those individuals. I know them well enough to understand their background, obviously, but also know something about how they communicate, how they approach things. And if I think it's a fit, then I bring them in to meet other board members and certainly the CEO. And when there is a particularly difficult role to fill because of a constellation of expertise that is needed, that's when search professionals are very, very helpful. And we go to them, and I spend a fair amount of time with them talking about the culture. And I want them to meet certain of the fellows, not everybody on the board, but other board members, and certainly the CEO and the CFO, so that they can get a feel for who may or may not fit into the organization, because the last thing I want to do is waste everybody's time interviewing folks who may have the right skills and background, but not the right fit.
That makes a lot of sense. And Marla, as I try to figure out how to bring this all together, we've done some amazing guidance today for our listeners about how to land the board seat, how to package yourself up, how to do the networking. And I was just hinting there about how much the world has changed, especially in the boardroom in the last 2 years from COVID. So I'd love if you'd sort of pull out your crystal ball, take a quick look, when you think about the future of the boardroom, how do you think things will continue to evolve and change? And this may draw back upon your legal background and expertise.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that my crystal ball is clear, but this is what I think is going to end up happening. We're going to start to see more and more board seats filled by first-time board members, and we're going to start seeing board members younger in their careers. So it used to be that board members tended to be retirees, and this is Act 2 of their career. When you think about all of the startup businesses and who are starting up those businesses and who understands the nomenclature and the mindset of, Gen X's and Gen Y's who are starting very successful businesses, they may not be baby boomers. So I think we're going to see could we call it a greening of the board, more first-time board members and younger in their careers. And I think we're definitely going to continue to see the push for diversity, so that investors will be demanding that the boards are diverse and really represent the customer base, the client base. So it'll be different. There will be more people considered for board service, and more people sooner in their career who understand the value they can bring to other companies, still having to balance growing their own careers while serving on boards.
Well, Marla, your magic 8-ball might have said check back later, but I would agree with a lot of the trends that you're seeing there. And just that last point, being on a board means you can bring a lot of value back to your existing organization as well today. And I think that's part of the selling point. It was a pleasure having you on the show today, Marla. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I am a true believer that the more diverse a board, the better the decisions that get made. And so to the extent your listeners are younger in their career, I urge them to educate themselves about what board service is all about and to see whether this is something that they think they'd find valuable to add to the portfolio of what they do professionally.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Marla Persky. It was wonderful to hear how her hard work of networking over time had opened up her board opportunities, and that's going to be true for most of us. That's how board searches happen. That's how seats get filled. And she gave great advice about how you can build your own best candidacy to put yourself out there in an actionable way so that you can move towards your dream of landing a board seat. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to all of today's resources. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in. Be Boardroom Bound.